everyone. Hope you're having a good summer. This is Mr. Goldenstein, or Mr. G, you can call me. I'm going to read a book to you that's part of the I Survived series. This book series has a bunch of different books that you can pick up, and I'm going to read just the first few chapters. If you like this book, you can pick it up at the library and finish it yourself, and then feel free to read, obviously, any of the others in the series. It's a really good series. It's a historical fiction series. What that means is they take a real event that happened, but they throw some made-up characters into the storyline and kind of tell the story of what happened in real life, but through these fictional characters. The one I'm going to read is I Survived the San Francisco Earthquake, 1906. Chapter 1, April 18, 1906, Rincon Hill, 5:12 a.m., which is very early in the morning, San Francisco, California. The sky was still dark when the ground began to shake. Most people in San Francisco were still sleeping. Just a few were awake. Shopkeepers arranged their stores, getting ready for the day. Carriage drivers fed their horses. Newsboys ran down the sidewalk to pick up their newspapers to sell. And 11-year-old Leo Ross was in a broken-down building high on Rincon Hill. When the rumbling started, Leo thought it might be thunder. He had no idea that deep below the city, two gigantic pieces of earth were pushing past each other. Powerful shocks exploded up through the underground layers of dirt and rock. All across the city, streets ripped open. Buildings swayed. Walls crumbled and houses came crashing down. Broken glass, hunks of wood, and piles of bricks tumbled into the streets. Leo stood in shock as the floor beneath him rose and fell like ocean waves. Hunks of plaster hit him on the head. Windows shattered, spraying glass all around. He tried to scream, but his throat was coated with dust. He wanted to run, but he couldn't even stand. The shaking was too hard. And then there was the sound like an explosion. The ceiling above his head burst open. A brick hit him, smack, on the back. And then another, thud, hit him in the shoulder. Crash! Dozens of bricks poured down. Leo fell to the floor and curled into a ball. The bricks kept coming, raining down. He couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. Soon he would be buried alive. That's the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2, and you can see here they have a little something on each chapter that starts off, and we'll get a little more information about that coming up here. But this says 20 hours earlier. So now we're going back in time before the scene we just had. President Roosevelt is coming to town, Leo shouted. Read all about it. Leo was standing on his corner, selling that morning's newspaper. The sidewalk was crowded with men rushing to work. They barely slowed down as they handed Leo their nickels and grabbed their newspapers from his hand. It was barely 7 o'clock in the morning, and Leo had sold almost all of his papers. He jingled his pockets, which were heavy with coins. He thought about the fresh roll he'd buy for breakfast, and maybe even some cold milk to wash it down with. He smiled to himself. Papa would have been proud of him. Leo patted his right-hand trouser pocket and felt the gold nugget that he'd always kept with him. And here we have a picture of Leo selling his newspapers. Any idea what that might be? It starts off this chapter. It didn't look like much, kind of like a chewed up yellow rock, but it was worth a fortune. Leo knew it. Probably he could get more money for it than he earned in months of selling papers, but he'd rather sell his heart than his gold nugget. Leo's grandfather had found it in a riverbed east of here during the gold rush. He handed it down to Papa, who had carried it with him everywhere. Grandpop got sick and died before Leo was born, but Papa kept him alive through the stories he'd tell to Leo. Each night, when Papa was getting Leo to bed, he'd take out the gold nugget. Leo would hold it tight in his hand as Papa told tales of Grandpa's adventures. Crossing America all alone in a creaky old wagon, almost getting eaten by a giant grizzly in the Rocky Mountains, surviving a forest fire in the Sierras, living in San Francisco when it was just a bunch of rickety houses in the mud. You're just like your grandpa, Papa always said. I see it in your eyes. You've got his good luck. You've got his guts. Something remarkable is going to happen to you. I can feel it, can't you? And the way Papa would look at him with shining eyes, Leo did feel it. These past few months since the fever took Papa away, there had been days when sadness would surround Leo, a feeling of cold and gray as the San Francisco fog. He felt scared and very alone. He'd miss Papa so bad, his whole body would hurt. But then he would think of Grandpa, who made his way from New Hampshire to California all by himself when he was just 16 years old. And he'd hear Papa's voice in his mind, bright and clear, telling him that he was lucky and brave and that something remarkable was going to happen to him. Papa's voice was loud and clear on this sunny day. Or it was, until Leo finished selling papers. He was walking down an alley, cutting through to Market Street. Somehow, he didn't even notice the two boys who had crept up behind him. Next thing Leo knew, he'd been smashed against a brick wall, and blood was gushing out of his nose. Chapter 3, and again we see that. You know what that is now? Hand it over, said a raspy voice. Leo didn't have to face them to know who was talking. It was Fletch Sykes, the most brutal thief in the neighborhood. The other kid had to be Wilkie Barnes, a giant of a boy who went everywhere Fletch did. When Fletch was just 5 years old, the story went, he'd been attacked by a pack of stray dogs. He'd survived, but one of the dogs had bitten his throat. The bite ruined his voice and turned Fletch vicious. Fletch and Wilkie didn't just steal food and pickpockets. Sometimes they beat kids up just for fun. A few months ago, they'd been caught by the police and sent to a work farm up north. Leo had heard a rumor that they had escaped. He'd heard that they were hiding out in an old abandoned saloon on Rincon Hill. And now here they were, back to their own vicious tricks. You can take my money, Leo said, trying not to sound as terrified as he felt. We don't want your money, Wilkie said. The kid was a monster. He had to weigh almost 300 pounds with smooth, chubby cheeks like a baby. A baby with a steel fist. What do you want? Leo asked, his knees shaking. You know, Fletch growled. Leo's heart stopped. Of course he knew. Somehow, Fletch had found out about Leo's gold nugget. But how? Leo hadn't told a soul about it. Except Morris. That little pesk of a kid who buzzed around Leo like a fly. Leo had shown him the gold a few weeks ago. He must have blabbed about it to the kids on the street, and the story had gotten back to Fletch and Wilkie. Fletch pushed Leo's face hard into the wall. The bones of Leo's cheek felt like they would crack, like the shell of an egg. Take my money, Leo said again. I have more than $1. Take it all. We will, Fletch said with a rasping laugh. But we want the gold, too. Hand it over. It was Papa's voice in Leo's head. Leo knew there was no way he could fight these guys, no way to outrun them. Wilkie was the fastest kid in the neighborhood. But that gold had been Papa's prized possession. Leo couldn't just give it up. No, Leo said, summoning up all of his strength. He whirled around and broke free from Fletch's grip. He made it about 3 steps before Wilkie caught him by the back of the shirt and threw him onto the ground. Slam! Leo landed hard, biting his tongue. Hand it over, Fletch shouted in his creepy, strangled voice. No, Leo yelled again. What happened next took only a minute. Wilkie picked up Leo by his shirt, holding him in the air as Fletch emptied Leo's pockets. Then Wilkie threw him into a pile of garbage. The two goons walked away, laughing. Blood dribbled from Leo's mouth. His head throbbed, but the worst was the searing pain from somewhere deep inside, like something had been ripped out of him. His gold was gone. So, that's the first few chapters of I Survived, the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Hope you enjoyed it. If you do, go get it from the library, finish it up. And like I said, there's plenty others in this series. So, have a wonderful summer. Keep reading.